cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. O Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text number 10. That's what I was told. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadhadmi buddhi yogham tam yenamam upayantite. Do devotees also recite, so you can recite if you like? Anyone? Tersham satatar yuktanam majatam pritipurvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Teksham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Mothers. Tersham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadhami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayantite. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam. I know, I got it. What I'm reciting. Yenamam upayantite. Word to word meaning. Tesham, unto them. Satata yuktanam, always engaged. Bhajatam, and rendering devotional service. Priti purvakam, and loving ecstasy. Dadadmi, I give. Buddhi yogam, real intelligence. Tam, that. Yena, by which. Mam, unto me. Upayanti, come. Te, they. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Srila Prabhupada's purport. In this verse, the word Buddhi Yogam is very significant. We may remember that in the second chapter, the Lord, instructing Arjuna, said that he has spoken to him of many things and that he would instruct him in the way of Buddhi Yoga. Now, Buddhi Yoga is explained. Buddhi Yoga itself is action in Krishna consciousness. That is the highest intelligence. Buddhi means intelligence, and Yoga means mystic activities or mystic elevation. When one tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and takes fully to Krishna consciousness in devotional service, his action is called Buddhi Yoga. In other words, Buddhi Yoga is the process by which one gets out of the entanglement of this material world. The ultimate goal of progress is Krishna. People do not know this. Therefore, the association of devotees and a bona fide spiritual master are important. One should know that the goal is Krishna, and when the goal is assigned, then the path is slowly but progressively traversed, and the ultimate goal is achieved. When a person knows the goal of life but is addicted to the fruits of activities, he is acting in karma yoga. When he knows that the goal is Krishna, but he takes pleasure in mental speculations to understand Krishna, he is acting in jnana yoga. And when he knows the goal and seeks Krishna completely in Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he is acting in bhakti yoga or buddhi yoga, which is the complete yoga. This complete yoga is the highest perfectional stage of life. A person may have a bona fide spiritual master and may be attached to a spiritual organization, but if he is still not intelligent enough to make progress, then Krishna from within gives him instructions so that he may ultimately come to him without difficulty. The qualification is that a person always engage himself in Krishna consciousness and with love and devotion render all kinds of services. He should perform some sort of work for Krishna, and that work should be with love. If a devotee is not intelligent enough to make progress on the path of self-realization, but is sincere and devoted to the activities of devotional service, the Lord gives him a chance to make progress and ultimately attain to him. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. So in these famous verses known as the Chatur Shloki, Krishna is now directly glorifying bhakti, again to encourage us to take refuge in devotion to himself. And in today's verse, Krishna is elaborating on the process by which a devotee is able to obtain him. We would normally refer to that as the abhideya, the methodology by which one can obtain the realization of the absolute truth or the goal of life. So Krishna is elaborating on that. And he says here, Tesham. So Tesham means unto them. So this is a certain category of persons, not everyone. And that category of persons, you can think of it sort of like an elite category, in the sense that an elite category means very few people are part of this category. So in this verse, Tesham, who are the persons who qualify for such an elite category? A small group of persons who fit this description. So Krishna describes them as Satata Yuktanam. They are always engaged in service to Krishna. The Acharyas have glossed the word Satata Yuktanam as those who are ceaselessly desiring to be with him, personally associate with Krishna. And that desire to constantly be with Krishna manifests itself in a very practical way. It manifests itself as bhajatam. Bhajatam means worship of Krishna. Tireless worship of Krishna, assiduous worship of Krishna. Tirelessly, they are performing bhajan. Bhajan means the activities of Shravan, Kirtan, etc. Because of their ceaseless desire to be with Krishna personally, that desire is practically manifesting as the tireless actions of hearing and chanting. Priti Purvakam. So this Krishna says is Priti Purvakam. I was often trying to understand the word priti in relationship to the sadhana, because priti is a word that we also use to describe the goal of life. Priti means love of Krishna. But here Krishna is speaking about a sadhaka who's trying to obtain him. So because it's a practice, he doesn't have love yet as such. And yet such a person who is desiring Krishna ceaselessly, desiring to be in his association personally, and is manifesting as his assiduous attention to his bhajan, then Krishna is describing such a person as being filled with loving ecstasy. Prabhupada's translation, Priti Purvakam. That ecstasy in the context of a sadhaka is his attachment to the prospect of obtaining love. This is the idea here. Satatam Yuktanam essentially refers to a devotee's desperation to be with Krishna personally. At that time, one can really be said to be worshipping Krishna, when one is doing it out of his total desperation for love, actually. Oftentimes in Krishna consciousness, we don't say that the goal of life is Krishna, but rather the goal of life is love for Krishna. So the search, actually, the quest is for Ananda, it's for love, actually. The quest is for love. So when our quest for love becomes so much desperate, that all sorts of other superfluous and inconsequential desires are pushed out. At that time, when one is so attached and so desperate for love, that he's performing his bhajan with that desperation, then that can be called as priti purvakam, a loving ecstasy. It's a loving attachment towards Krishna. And such a devotee is attached to his prospect of obtaining that goal. In other words, he has faith that it can be obtained, not that it can't be obtained. I just recently heard a devotee was visiting one place, and he was asking for the qualification for going back home, back to Godhead, in which he was given the answer that Nishta is a qualification for going back home, back to Godhead, which I thought was funny because it flies in the face of what's actually taught in the books. But this sort of answer also somewhat betrays, perhaps, a lack of faith in the ability to actually achieve the objective. Because the ideal of prema is a very high ideal, naturally. And oftentimes we will notice that there's a huge dichotomy between our ideal and our reality. And sometimes the gap between the two seems so far away that one starts to disbelieve in the ideal. It's not, ideals means things that aren't or apparently practical. One won't be able to achieve them as such. So the devotee was mentioned like this, prema is not really the goal, nishta, if you get nishta, that's enough. But that of course is not the teaching of Krishna consciousness. One wants love. So when his desperation for love becomes intense, and he performs his bhajan with that desperation, such an attachment can be referred to as priti purvakam. He's attached to his prospect of actually obtaining that love. That means he has faith that it's possible. And as such, Krishna, in response to that desperation, what does he confer upon such a devotee? Dadami Buddha Yogam Tam. I will give them the inner inspiration. Buddha Yogam here refers to super soul within the heart, who will inspire the devotee to move progressively toward him without any obstacles as such, or overcoming all obstacles. As he will give him the inspiration from within, how to actually approach the Supreme Lord. Yena mam upayanti te. I will give him the inner inspiration by which he can actually move toward me and obtain me, the goal of his life. So this, sometimes, you'll hear this is often a question that may come up from devotees who may be a little immature. How can I know if it's my mind or if it's super soul inspiring me from within? I feel inspired to do this. And I think maybe the super soul is telling me this. How do I know if it's super soul or if it's the mind? Oftentimes the answer is, if you're conditioned soul, you should just take it for granted it's the mind. There should be no questions about that, especially if you're very conditioned. But one indicator that it could be revelation, because it's not that transcendental revelation is beyond the scope of contemporary feasibility. Again, this is often the sense that comes to conditioned souls when the ideal is so high. The ideal is very high, prema. So as such, it may be concluded by some, because the ideal is so high, that such revelation is beyond contemporary feasibility. And as such, if anyone expresses any sort of enlightenment or they want to share revelation, it is oftentimes disbelieved. Because the ideal is so high, how can you be getting such revelation? So oftentimes we may be afraid that, oh, it's a speculation or it's an imagination. I'm getting some inspiration from within. How do I know it's genuine revelation and not just speculation or imagination? So here, Krishna's giving some indication that, first of all, I don't reciprocate like this with everyone. This is the first point. It's not that of course Krishna's in everyone's heart, but it's not like he's giving that sort of divine intelligence by which the persons can come to him. Not for everyone. Tesham, for a group of individuals, an elite group, so to speak, is the word I'm using here. That elite group are persons who are satatam yuktanam. They're totally desperate after love. That means they want bhav, they want the goal of their sadhana. For devotees, that means bhav bhakti. The example, this is called as sampratanatmika viknapti in the Nectar of Devotion. And the quote given by Rupa Goswami is that just as a young boy is attracted to a young girl, and a young girl is attracted to a young boy, in the same way may I be attracted to you. So this is a prayer for bhav bhakti. It's called sampratanatmika viknapti, submission to the Lord, when one is offering prayers to achieve bhav. And in Krishna consciousness, it's not generic. I just want love. Like, the word love can be very misleading, especially in the modern context. Therefore, it's kind of safer to use words like bhava and prema instead of love, so that it's not confused for something material. So the devotee is actually praying for bhav, and in the context of Gaudiya theology, that means one of the braja bhavas, the bhava of a dasya bhakta, or a sakya bhakta, vatsalya bhakta, or madhurya bhakta. One sets as his ideal a braja bhava, and he's after that type of love. So Satatam Yuktanam Bhajatam, he's performing his bhajan in utter desperation after that love, priti purvakam. For that type of individual, I will give the inner inspiration, the divine intelligence by which he can actually obtain that bhav, and by obtaining that love, of course, obtain me thereafter. So this is one way we can understand that, is it my mind? Is it super soul? Well, let's look at our bhajan. How much are we attached, first of all, to the activities of Shravan and Kirtanam? And second of all, in what consciousness are we doing those activities? Because as conditioned souls, we function very well in social situations. And so oftentimes religious life becomes a socially viable situation by which conditioned souls can nicely intermingle and so on. And so the socially viable religious life is sometimes equated to be the quest for the absolute truth, which is characterizing such a devotee. But the two are actually not the same. One is socially viable religious life. It's nice, people can get together and they have sangha, of course. There may be a little bit of talking about Krishna, not too much, of course, and then the socializing part becomes a more important element, which is natural, it's conditioned existence as such. But Krishna is not talking about those sorts of persons who are just living socially viable religious lives, but rather who perform their bhajan with the hope and the attachment to obtaining that bhava. You'll read also in the Nectar of Devotion where 6 characteristics of devotional service are given, and one of them is sudurlabha. Sudurlabha means that devotional service is very rarely obtained. And sudurlabha relates to bhav bhakti. So 2 reasons are given why this bhava is very rare to obtain. The first reason is given is that because bhava doesn't appear after attachment, unless sadhana is performed with attachment, then bhava will not come. This is the first reason given by Rupa Goswami. And the second reason is given that even if you're performing sadhana with attachment, Krishna does not give bhava immediately until your attachment becomes very intense. This is actually the idea of Krishna showing himself before Narada Muni in the first canto, where he appears before Narada Muni in his previous life, and then he disappears. And then his heart is just being wrenched by the fact that Krishna is not appearing before him again. And so Krishna comes before him again as an Akashvani, a sky voice, and tells him why he is not actually appearing before him. For the sake of time, I'm just going to gloss over that section, but what is described there is that Krishna was creating a situation of separation. This is according to the commentary of Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Because by the separation from Krishna, then his bhava will become increased. His bhava, which was in a state of an infantile state, can come to a state of youthfulness by the total desperation for Krishna, which is the characterization of being separated from Krishna. One's affinity becomes for Krishna so much more. And that way his bhava becomes augmented. And in this way, Krishna knows how to, Dadami Buddha Yogam Tam, he's expertly bringing his devotee closer to him. Why? By disappearing from his vision. In fact, this is also characterizes the story of Bharat Maharaj. We hear about Bharat Maharaj becoming attached to a deer. And oftentimes to instruct sadhakas like ourselves, we say that, because he was in the forest, he was all alone, he didn't have sangha, so he got attached to a deer, got to be careful. That's just more or less an instructive thing for sadhakas, but that sort of explanation does not satisfy a thoughtful person, only because bhava is the transformation of the internal Shakti of Krishna. And the happiness that is inherent in bhava, coming from the Hladini Shakti of the internal potency, makes Brahman look dry. What to speak of the happiness in the material world? So how could he become attached to a deer? That doesn't make any sense. So then the Acharyas explain in the 8th chapter of the 5th canto, Srila Prabhupada following Sri Vishwanath also explains that what was actually taking place was Krishna was creating a situation of separation. Because Bharat Maharaj had his bhav consciousness in a deer body. So you can imagine that would be rough. I mean, if we had our consciousness in a deer body, we would probably commit suicide, immediately. Like, you can imagine Nalakuvera, Manigriva, they had demigod consciousness in a tree body. That's really rough, because demigod consciousness means I'm going to enjoy nicely. So you can imagine how heavy that would be. Bharat Maharaj had bhav consciousness in a deer body. So being so much aware of the dire situation he was in, that only increased his desperation for Krishna. And that way Krishna created a situation to expertly bring him back to himself. So Satyatam Yuktanam is, this is required, this asakti, this attachment to first this attachment to the Ishtadevata, our most worshipful deity, which may not be the same for everyone according to your taste in Krishna consciousness. According to the type of love you're desperate for, your Ishtadeva will manifest accordingly. So when that attachment for the Ishtadevata is there, then only Krishna is reciprocating by giving the inner inspiration by which you can actually obtain himself. So then the question would have to be how to get this sort of desperation. That's really, because, okay, Krishna's reciprocating really with that type of individual in such a wonderful way. It's not that he's not reciprocating with others, but that reciprocation is generic. This reciprocation is very specific, divine intelligence by which they can catch me. Otherwise, Krishna is not easy to catch, right? So that sort of intelligence. So then the question will become how to get that. So it begins with the seeing Krishna through the ears. This verse is coming from the Bhagavad. Tvam bhakti yoga paribhavita hritsaroja ase shrutekshita pato nanunata pumsa yad yadiyata urgaya vibhavayanti tata vapu pranayase sadanugrahaya. This is a good verse. This is a beautiful verse. So the verse is saying, first, Shruta Ikshita Patal, the path, Prabhupada's translation, the path of seeing God through the ears. So that's the beginning of developing this desperation. That our connection with absolute beatitude begins with the process of hearing. Otherwise, there's no question of understanding the transcendence. Our eyes only have access to the phenomenal world, not the trans-phenomenal world. So our beginning connection with transcendental reality is through the ears. Shruta Ikshita. So Ikshita means to see, seeing through the ears. So one first establishes his connection with the absolute truth by hearing from Sadhu Guru. And that Guru, along with describing the beauty of the absolute reality, also describes a process in which to obtain that absolute beauty. Because obviously we're after beauty. If it wasn't beautiful, we wouldn't go for it. In fact, Prabhupada says in the 4th canto, actually, he says it in a very controversial purport, which I'm not going to mention what the controversy is there, so we don't get distracted. But in the purport, he mentions that unless you find something absolutely beautiful, you cannot surrender completely to it. So first, you must hear from Sadhu Guru about the absolute beatitude of spiritual reality. And he also describes the process of obtaining that absolute beauty. And then what happens, Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paribhavita Hritsaroja Ase. So then hearing that and then taking up the sadhana, one's heart becomes infused with bhakti. This is a word that Vishwanath uses, Sri Vishwanath uses. Bhavita means infused. His heart becomes infused with bhakti yoga. And as such, it becomes a suitable place for Krishna to take his seat, ase. Tvam bhakti yoga paribhavita hritsaroja ase. Ase means to sit. So his heart being infused with bhakti yoga, Krishna takes his seat there. And then, as a result of Krishna taking his seat there, what happens? Yad yadya, he's always able to think of Krishna, because Krishna is taking his seat there in the heart infused with bhakti. Yad yadya, he's always able to meditate upon Krishna, who is most glorious, taruragaya vibhavayanti. And as such, tata vapur pranayase, Krishna says, I manifest that form in which he was always meditating upon. Sadanugrahaya, to show my mercy to that devotee. So yeya tamam prapatyante, tam sataya bhajamyaham. The way I like to gloss this verse is, how do you want your Krishna? It's not that all is one. It's a very personal process. So how do you want your Krishna? And he reciprocates accordingly. If you want to be Krishna's enemy, then he'll chop off your head, no problem. If you want to be his friend, then he reciprocates as a friend. If you want to be his servant, he reciprocates as the master. If you want to be his lover, he reciprocates as the beloved. How do you want your Krishna? Tata vapur pranayase, I manifest before him that form in which he was always meditating on in the process of sadhana. Same thing is described here by saying the Dami Buddha Yogam Tam Yenamam Upanyantite. I will manifest before him that form. So it begins with, Prabhupada says it also here, that's what I was. The ultimate goal of progress is Krishna. People do not know this, therefore the association of devotees and a bona fide spiritual master are important. So the living entity in the material world is suffering from beginningless ignorance, and so that has to be removed. So it has to start with the path of seeing through the ears. Shruta Ikshita Pata. After that, according to the degree you take that medicine, to that degree you will actually get attachment. Satatam Yukta now mentioned here. Now the verse is there. Bhakti Pareshadna Bhavo Viraktir Anyatra Chaisha Trika Ekakala. You know this verse? Prabhat Yamanashi Yatashna Tashus Tushri Pushi Sura Bayo Nugasam. I haven't tried that verse in like 5 years. I hardly remember it. But it's a really powerful verse. The verse is saying, just as when you're eating, in the process of eating, then what happens? Your body becomes nourished. It becomes satisfied. You become satisfied. And also you feel free from hunger also, isn't it? By the process of eating. So similarly, to the degree you take this bhakti, this process of Shravan Kirtan, then you become tushti pushti. You become satisfied and you become nourished. Means that if you take a little bit Shravan Kirtan, then you get a little bit of nourishment. If you take a lot of Shravan Kirtan, then you get a lot of nourishment. That's the idea here. So having heard of absolute beatitude from Guru and the process to obtain that, now how much you are taking that process? How much are you taking that process? To that degree, one develops that attachment. Yata yatatma paramikyate so ma punyagata shavana abidanai tata tata pashyati vastu shukshman. Similar verse. Yata yata, to the degree one's atma has been purified from contamination. How? Mat punyagata shavana abidanai. By the process of hearing my pious narrations. Shavana abidanai means chanting them as well. Then tata tata, to that degree, pashyati vastu shukshman, you will see that subtle spiritual reality, that absolute beauty that you're hankering for, to that degree. By taking that medicine as you were first hearing from Guru, developing that attachment, Krishna is reciprocating by giving this inner inspiration to obtain him. There are many actually angles this verse could take, but it's half hour, so I'm going to stop here. I know I have an hour, but I like to stop and leave time for questions or comments or add-ons or whatever. And further insights if they like, yes. Oh, the mic is sorry.
Hare Krishna. So the process of encouraging devotees to take the seriousness in devotional service. So the Guru is giving the goal and the instructions to get it. But as a society of devotees, we obviously, the association of devotees is also a very important part.
Yeah.
So part of this, obviously, to develop in ourselves this desire for Brahma Bhakti. But how else can we encourage within the society attaining this goal rather than the religious?
Yeah, the socially viable religious thing that we're so attached to oftentimes.
That so many devotees are attached to. Yeah.
Actually, it depends on the strength of our own ruchi for the absolute truth. Just like this verse is there. Shushu sho shodadanasya vasudeva kata ruchi shamaha sevaya vipra punya tirtha nishevanat. So this verse is saying that by service to great devotees, great service is done. And by such service, one develops Vasudeva Kataruchi, a taste, an affinity for hearing Vasudeva Kata. That means that and Prabhupada, not in this verse, but in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, he mentions how that pure devotional association, I think, is as infectious in a good way as infectious diseases. So that means we have to become sick, so to speak, catch the disease of taste for Krishna consciousness. And then if you catch that disease, it's highly contagious. So anyone who's around such a devotee, they also catch that sickness, if you will. So that's required, actually. Otherwise, it's not possible to encourage persons who are conditioned, and therefore, due to that conditioning, not having taste for Harikatha, if we ourselves are also like that. Even though we can try to encourage each other by some positive words, we got to hear and take this hearing seriously, it won't have any effect. Because if one has not yet caught that disease, so to speak, the infection of taste for Harikatha, then how you will infect others. That's kind of the idea. So in 1.2.16, the verses I'm quoting, Prabhupada has 2 lectures on that verse. You can hear them if you like. And in one of the lectures, he was describing to his disciples that it is not, don't think it is just the people's fault that they don't have attraction to Krishna. But he said it's also the fault of the preachers that we're not able to give them taste. So from that, I'm taking my conception and my answer. That we have to catch the infection ourselves, get a taste. Then it's highly contagious. Anyone who's around you will become attracted. So that kind of is required. Somehow that we got to catch that disease. And I also use the word sadhu guru as both. So sadhus and guru. You catch it from the guru. Sometimes we may have been too dull to catch it from the guru at the time of initiation or something. And later on you catch it from some sadhu. But somehow you have to catch that infection. And once you catch the infection, it is highly contagious. Then you don't have to worry about infecting others. In fact, you may not even be concerned about infecting others, and they will be infected. They want to hear that Harikatha. So if you see that in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita, a book by one of our acharyas, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in describing the distribution of mercy by devotees, he says that different devotees on different levels are differently empowered to distribute Krishna consciousness. So he says those who are on the platform of prema, they practically have unlimited power. Even if you don't have any credit in piety or anything, they can give you Krishna consciousness somehow or other if you associate favorably. Those on the platform of bhava, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains, that if they have sufficient piety, and piety mean here is bhakti sukriti, then just by the personality of a bhava bhakta, a materialistic person will be elevated immediately to the platform of ruchi. And other sadhakas, they will be brought to the stage of bhava by such a devotee. And what I find interesting there is that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says by his personality. Now, even his speaking is one thing, but just his personality will infect them with taste for Krishna consciousness. And he says for sadhakas, whether they be Vaidhi sadhakas or Raganuga sadhakas, then at best they can inspire some faith. And that too, if the persons they're speaking to have sufficient piety, and you have proper example and proper prachar, proper achar and prachar. So therefore, in a big institution like ours, we do often emphasize having proper prachar and achar. Because if we have yet to attain the platform of bhava, then the only hope that we have for helping others is that we might be able to give them a little faith to continue their practices by proper example and proper precept, teaching. But if you catch a high level of the infection, then anyone around you will definitely get infected. I don't have Bhava Bhakti guarantee. If I had to share the contents of my consciousness honestly, I couldn't do it. Let's just put it like that. But I do like shastras. I'm like a little bit of a geek. I like to study a lot. And because of that, whenever I'm speaking to devotees, I always speak the things that I'm learning when I'm studying. Whatever I'm learning, I like to share that with devotees. And I notice is that whoever I'm around, even if most of the time they may not be so interested in discussing Shastra, they become interested because I'm like really into it. I'm like a geek about it. I have a lot of enthusiasm. And so when I'm around other devotees who may not always be having the same interest or the same capacity, I find that they also get inspired. So that is required, our own enthusiasm. And the best is we're really like drunk, if so to speak, off of Harikatha. Then they associate with you a drunkard, you also become drunkard like this. That would be my answer. Any Hare Krishna Prabhu?
The bhakta or the devotee that is being described here, what category of devotee are we speaking about that Krishna reciprocates in this way?
Yes. So he's a sadhaka, at least according to our acharyas, including Prabhupada here. He's a practitioner. So the stages of sadhana, the stage of sadhana bhakti is from shraddha all the way up to asakti. All such persons are considered sadhakas. So a sadhaka, ruchi is a very high level of consciousness. Nishtha is a very high level of consciousness. Mostly in the first 6 chapters, the verses when Krishna is describing a self-realized person more or less relates to a nishtha bhakta, if you want to look at it in the context of bhakti. Nishtha is pretty high. Ruchi is even better. Ruchi, there's an intense taste for bhajan. And asakti, there's an intense attachment to the Ishta Devata, the object of bhajan. But all such persons are called sadhakas. According to Sri Vishwanath, and I think Baladev Vibhushan also, the previous verse described bhav bhaktas, or those who are already attained the sadhya. So in this verse, Krishna is speaking about how they attain that position. So we were hearing about a sadhaka, but as I was describing it, it's a sadhaka on the stage of a sakti. He's actually priti purvakam, and that's being manifest practically as his total engagement in bhajan with total desperation for obtaining that bhava in which he's hankering after. So that's how I've understood it from my study here of the
What I'm trying to get is that if the one you're describing here is a sadhaka,
yes.
I think in yesterday's purport is speaking about that intensity there, like fish out of water,
Yes.
So, and in the translation to Machita Madgata, Prabhupada says, thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. So I'm trying to, put together, is it the same person Krishna is saying, to those who are constantly devoted to serving his love?
Yeah, I thought that too, interestingly enough. I also thought the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I looked it up, and I'll just read for you Sri Vishwanath's statement here and Baladev Vibhushana's maybe. So, because Prabhupada used their commentaries to write his, oftentimes if you look at those for references, you get a little bit more clarity of what's going on. And Prabhupada's purports mostly follow Srila Baladev's commentary for the most part, with a few things added from Sri Vishwanath, so that always helps. I also thought the same thing. I thought Teshan meant for the Bhav Bhaktas. That's because in relationship to the previous verse. But, hold on. Here's what Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says about it. I'll just pull it up really quick. Bhagavad Gita, where is it? Yes, here. Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says this: it is understood that this is 10.10, commentary to the verse we're studying today. It is understood that the joy of the devotee described in the previous verse is spiritual bliss beyond the modes. So Bhav Bhakta, Bhav is beyond the modes. But which method do the devotees gain direct contact with you? So method means the sadhana. To have these feelings beyond the modes is the sadhya, to be beyond the modes of material nature. But which method do the devotees gain direct contact with you? And from what source do they gain realization? And then the rest of the commentary says, it's a very short commentary actually. I give Buddha Yoga to those who are desirous of association with me constantly, Satata Yuktanam. This means that the Lord alone causes Buddha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, to appear within the functions of their hearts. So if you read Nectar of Devotions, this is exactly how the descent of Bhav is described. It appears within the function of the mind and takes over the mind. The description is actually quite similar as the language being used here. This Buddha Yoga cannot be obtained at all from any other source. It is given only by me and received only by the devotee. By this bhakti they attain me. They attain direct association with me. Upayanti, they come near to me. That's his commentary. So from there, I understood it was sadhana bhakti being described here. And maybe, let me see if I have Baladev's commentary already pulled up. I do. Srila Baladeva Vibhushana says this here. Yeah. But how is it possible for them to grasp you, who are infinite in form, qualities, and powers, just through the teachings of a guru? So that's that. So here he's hearing from a guru. So that means a sadhaka who's hearing from a guru. He's learning about the process. So, but how can they understand your infinite form and all these things? Answer: for those who desire constant association with me, satata yukta nam, who worship me with pleasure, understanding me as I really am, priti purvakam. So here priti purvakam means that you've heard from the guru and you've understood the nature of absolute beatitude, and now you're going after it. The priti purvakam. I, relishing their devotion to me, offer to them intelligence such that they can understand, worship, and attain me with my infinite qualities and powers, Buddha Yogam, by which they attain me. So you can't speak of attainment if you already attained, so to speak. They're attaining him from the platform of sadhana and they're getting Krishna. That's how I at least understood those commentaries.
Just one other question. Sometimes in course of preaching or interacting with religious people, maybe from other traditions, because we have a mindset of it's Krishna that all attractive, and sometimes if people, they describe some intimate connection or realization or perception of God, there may be tendency that we may want to minimize or not accept that if it doesn't conform to the process we're familiar with. But then at the same time, we may not want to be presumptuous and dismiss because we think that God, He has the ability to reveal to others. So if you are interacting with someone from other tradition who is, confessing some intimate, what's the outlook? How do you reconcile?
Yeah, on a personal level, one cannot question persons who are describing an experience. You can only question their theology or their philosophy that may be underpinning their conception of the realization that they have. So that can be questioned, but an experience can't be questioned. Just like if I tell you this sweet rice was so amazing, you can't question that. It's not, well, I don't know if I believe that because there's no way for you to question that. But then, you can question the ingredients that I use to make the sweet rice. And then if you find out that I use salt instead of sugar, you might have a doubt about if it was really that great after all, and so on. So that theology can be questioned and incisively, critiqued, so to speak. But experiences cannot. So if persons are sharing an experience, I generally just will either take it for granted that what they're telling me is something genuine that they felt. At the same time, Krishna's giving some criteria here as well, which is just universal principle really. Satatam yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. You would expect that such persons would have to have a lifestyle to match. Not that I'm having such high experience and then right after I'm at Steak and Shake. We have a place like that in America called Steak and Shake. And I remember when I first joined Krishna consciousness, when I first read SSR, I was so inspired by Prabhupada's words because it was a perfect blend of philosophy and relationship. Because before Prabhupada's SSR, I found that Middle Eastern traditions, such as Christianity and so on, they emphasize a lot about relationship with God, which I thought was very sweet, and I was looking for that also. I wanted to fall in love. And I won't go into my life story, but I was wanting to fall in love, and it had to be pure and whatever. I was in illusion about a lot of things, but whatever I was, I avoided relationships for the most part because it was supposed to be pure and wonderful. And so I appreciated that about the Middle Eastern traditions, for which we were familiar with in the West, but they didn't have much philosophy to back them. So when persons of such traditions were questioned, they didn't do very well in answering those questions because the philosophy was very either non-existent or very flimsy, or their understanding was very flimsy. Whereas in the East, you had these very detailed philosophical systems, that was very attractive, but then the conclusion for most of them was impersonalism, or you cease to exist. And that was very disappointing. So I found myself in a very odd place until I found SSR, which was a beautiful blend of, here's a deep philosophical system that's teaching us how to use our head to cultivate the heart, so to speak, and to have that eternal relationship with Krishna. So therefore, the principles in these books are quite universal. And although I won't question a person's experience as such, as they may have felt something very genuine. At the same time, like I said, if they go to the Steak and Shake, I would doubt that. Anyway, there was another point I wanted to make. So I was so inspired by SSR that I was going to any religious tradition. I was seeing that God was equally manifest everywhere. And my best friend, her name was Sarah Rios, and she was becoming a born-again Christian. At the same time, I was becoming a devotee of Krishna. So because she was my best friend in high school, and I was 18 at the time, I was going to all her meetings to encourage her in her spiritual pursuit, as I was also being encouraged in my own spiritual pursuit. And I would be so enthusiastic at the programs. In fact, everyone there thought I was a really dedicated Christian, because they would do sing along. They had the songs they would sing with guitar and so on. And for me, it was almost like kirtan. So I was putting all my energy into it, and I would be dancing, and they thought I was a really devout Christian. And so much so that SSR was the only book I had at the time. And so whatever I was learning from SSR, I was sharing that with this Christian group also. And they would be taking notes, this is amazing, and be taking notes. None of them knew that it was coming from Srila Prabhupada's SSR, Science of Civilization, except for my friend. And she just thought, anyway, let him come. He'll soon come on our side after he gets a little bit elevated, like that. Anyway, during the program, many times I would see the preacher would speak, and people would be crying. I mean, they would be so emotional. And I used to oftentimes get a little bewildered, come on, is it really all that, I would doubt. I would have a doubt. But I wouldn't dwell on that. Okay, fine, they're experiencing something, whatever. And then right after the program, the sermon, we would all go to Clark's, which is a restaurant near the university where this program was having. And everyone would be ordering steaks and hamburgers. And they were speaking all sorts of nonsense at the dinner table, And I used to be, because I was, at the time, when you're new out of the material pool and learning about Krishna consciousness, the excitement is like an adrenaline rush. So you just want to talk about Krishna and whatever you're learning. And so I wanted to talk about those things, and they were just talking about their grades in school, and she did this and he did that. And I said, what happened to all the fervent, just 10 minutes ago you were upstairs pouring your little heart out, and now it's just inconsequential. So at that time I might doubt, They might say I had this experience. I might have a little doubt, I remember also a devotee who had joined our temple, very new. He told me that he's I had darshan of Vishnu many years ago. He was telling me I had darshan of Vishnu, but he could never see anything good in any of Krishna's devotees. So I asked him point blank, if you had darshan of Vishnu, how come you can't see anything good in any other devotees? And then he started finding fault with me for saying that. So then at that time, I had a little doubt about what it was that was actually revealed to them. But as a general policy, you cannot question experiences. It's and like I said, although oftentimes it is the case that what people call it as a genuine experience might just be their imagination or some speculation. They might be a little diluted. That's actually quite possible. But it's not that we should discount the possibility of revelation taking place, especially if it can be seen that this devotee is very serious in terms of his bhajan. And at the same time, even if you see that the tendency is to doubt, especially if one is yet to have such experiences, then the tendency is always to doubt any sort of revelation from anyone else. Because how can they get it and not me? The envy starts to play a huge role in that. Someone tells you so-and-so came to me in a dream and revealed to me this. You're like, yeah, right, come on. You don't say that to him to his face, but internally, because of the envy, you might be, no, that's impossible. I've been practicing for 20 years over this devotee. I didn't get such things. So sometimes the tendency is to doubt, and it's not that it should be discounted. At the same time, we would question the theology underpinning the revelation. And that can be discussed intellectually, but experience is beyond the jurisdiction of intellect. So I like to give the benefit of the doubt and leave that issue.
Prabhu, I will inform one information to all the devotees, how Lord reciprocate and how Buddhi Yoga is given to certain persons. There is a book, his title is Sadhaks of Vrindavan, Braj area, written by Abad Bihari Kapoor, A.B. Kapoor. From that book I am telling one story. There are some 300 or 400 sadhaks against which these type of stories are there.
Mm-hmm.
There was a old lady near the bank of Jamuna who was living with grinding wheat. From wheat to flour he was making with the help of grinder. In that time there was no electricity or no atta mill in Vrindavan. So, and nearby area there was a sadhak also. So that sadhak was unable to concentrate in his daily bhajan because of the noise of that grinding. So while performing his daily bhajan, he felt somewhat awkward situation and complained to the Lord. This is my difficulty. One day, one fine morning, a boy of 16 years or like came to that old lady and told, you leave this business. Then she told, then how can I live? This is the only means of my living. So that boy told, I am giving you an idol, you keep it. So many people will come to see this idol. And the money they will give in pranami, that will be sufficient for